So our central question is, will the might of AI technology award its users a competitive edge too powerful to ignore? The first part here, we're going to have segments to this trial. We tried to break down the question into how everyone will approach to engaging with AI. So the two segments of the trial, one is about accessibility and performance, and the second segment is about transparency. The first part of it is, and Temi will start us off, and it really is, can I, up to this point about accessibility and transparency, so I'll turn it over to the prosecution, is when I look at AI and what it offers, can I genuinely use AI in my daily work without using a tech expert to give me access to this power?
Your Honor, members of the jury, good evening. Let's take a moment to think. How many of you have been frustrated by AI? Like you woke up one morning and you're like, God, this thing doesn't tell me exactly what I need. Hands up? Okay, we're not alone. So we can see that not everyone here is an expert. Now let's boil it down. How many of you are so busy that sometimes you skip lunch at work? So why would your manager ask you to learn prompt engineering? Mm-hmm. Why do you have to learn RAG? Don't you have enough work to do? And then let's say they give you the tool and you try to use it. It becomes a full-time job added to your full-time job. So really, where's the productivity? Is there really productivity, or are we just suffering just because we have to use AI? I'm curious to see what my defendants thinks about that. You're going to teach me how I'm going to do my job and also not add a full-time job. Take it away.
Thank you, prosecution. Defense Hawkins. Well, how do you respond to this?
Where's my GPT?
Members of the jury, it's a great proposition, actually, right? Actually, I'm going to take a query of the audience as well. How many of you have used ChatGPT or Gemini and actually thought, wow, this actually produced a better response than I could even put together? I rest my no. There's an element of obviously leveraging the tools and technology out there that's going to take time. But what I always say is look at the time it already takes you to actually put some of this information together, to do the research, to acquire this information, to format this information, to really think through and reason what you actually need to say at the final output, and then get turned down by a senior partner or your boss and say, there's too many spelling mistakes, this doesn't really make sense, you haven't really thought through all the options. But now imagine you're leveraging AI as a tool that can do this reasoning for you, can think through all the processes, think through all the gaps in your arguments, and give you all that information so you can actually put together this data in a more effective manner. AI is really a tool here, right? It's like a calculator. If you're a mathematician, you're still going to use a calculator at the end of the day. It speeds up the process. It's supposed to be a solution that's a means to an end. And hopefully we'll have a little discussion around how much of that means to an end does it support.
I hope you teach me how I don't have to go through 6 different tools to get my work, particularly.
Back to you. You're going to demonstrate this. I mean, I loved your question. I loved your provocative question and engaging our jury. But I want to add, there's other things about what these answers you gave. Were they towards productive things, or were just asking it random things for our interest?
Yeah, it's a good question. Back to the question of can I actually use AI in my daily work without needing to be an expert or tech expert? Temi has a great point. You're probably using, 6, 10, 50 applications at work on a daily basis. And there's solutions out there. And I'm going to talk about one. Funny enough, there's a solution at Google that solves this problem. It's called Agent Space. And again, there's tons of other solutions out there that also provide a similar experience. I'll talk about this solution just because it's related to enterprise and also because I represent Google. So Agent Space essentially is all your Gemini, your generative AI, VO2, VO3, all the latest advancements in AI, all in one place from a technology standpoint, but benefit organizations because it's connected to your enterprise data. So if you're using Outlook, if you're using Gmail, if you're using Drive, if you're using Salesforce, ServiceNow, Jira, I'm sure a lot of these applications you've heard of. And there's hundreds of applications organizations roll out. And for your job, you're probably using, 10 or more in your daily basis. And solutions like Agent Space aggregate this information so that you don't actually need to go into each one of those applications. And better than me showing you a slide, I'm actually going to show you a demo of how this would work. And there's 3 elements to it. There's the find element. So find this information, kind of what I was talking about. Very difficult to go find information across the organization. Has this been done before? Do I need to reinvent the wheel here? Right? Tell me about this, customer. Find out further information about a colleague that's an expert on this topic. Understand this information. You found all this information. Put it together. Do the Gen AI piece. Reason through this information, and give me what I'm looking for as an output. That normally, I think we heard Nazek talk about uploading a document onto ChatGPT. But how do you secure the business and not have to actually take it outside the existing systems, right? Keep it within your organization. And once you've got the output, right, you've got this beautiful answer, you've generated this amazing email, instead of copying and pasting and moving documents over to other applications to execute, leverage AI agents to actually perform those tasks on your behalf, right? This full end-to-end workflow at the touch of your fingertips, right? It's the whole element of being able to leverage this all in one place. So I'm going to switch over to an agent space environment, where I'm going to show you this example. So this is kind of the landing page for customer user data. Looks very similar to Google search, right? And to Temi's point, we want this to be very easy. We want it to be like searching, right? As an example, let's pretend that I'm a marketing analyst, and it's my first day on the job. And my manager actually gave me a task of saying, hey, can you find out about this Future Gamers Corporation? Gather all the information that we have within the organization about it, and actually create me a one-pager, marketing one-pager specifically, around this organization that we can send to them. You're probably going to spend the first day trying to find this information. If not, you might spend the whole week gathering the information across the organization, writing out this one-pager until it's perfect to be able to send over. I'll show you how you would do it in Agent Space. Starting, firstly, just to quickly show you, you have all your enterprise applications connected: SharePoint, Calendar, Drive, Jira, your mail, Salesforce, Slack, and so on. All your existing applications, you don't actually need to go into anymore. You can just directly ask Agent Space, tell me about the Future Gamers account. It will go and find this information wherever it's located. In this case, you can see on the right side, you have a very Google search-like feature where it's ranking all the information, telling you primarily where it got this information from. So you can see, in this case, a lot of the information that it's pulling from is actually from Salesforce, right? I don't need to be an expert in Salesforce, right, to go find this information. It's my first day. I probably don't even have credentials to Salesforce. So if this application already knows my access controls, finds the information that is relevant for my query, brings it, and you can see it summarizes this information. It's giving me the general information that it's pulled. It's giving me a description, recent activity, and even a case study that I actually pulled from slides. So it gives me a blended search experience of all the information that my organization has talked about around this specific account. But that wasn't my objective for my manager. The objective for my manager is read me the marketing one page. I don't care if you're an expert on this account. So that comes to the next step. You can now ask these models to, after finding this information, to do the generation piece. So I'm going to ask it to create the content for a marketing one-pager that talks about the NeuroVibes offerings. And this is my company, NeuroVibe. It's a fake, fictitious company that does data annotation. Offering for Future Gamers Corporation. And you can see it's actually drafted this entire one-pager for me. It's giving me unlock the next level of player experience with AI-powered solutions. It's given me the NeuroVibe AI advantage, given me some examples, why choose NeuroVibe AI, and put it together in a nice, clean, and concise manner. And this looks pretty good. Looks like actually one page. So it followed the rules I gave it. Next, let's say I want to actually, with this one pager, probably generate an image, because no marketing one pager is good without an image. These models are natively multimodal. So I can actually just ask it, generate an image from the above marketing pitch. I don't need to go to a separate AI video generation or audio image generation tool to generate any of this content. I'm just having a conversation with my personal AI assistant. It generates the content for me, generates me the image, and now for the last piece is I want to make sure my manager is okay with this. So I'm going to actually email this marketing pitch to my manager to review, as a good employee does. So it's now looking and found my manager's email, given a subject title, put together all the information, including the image, and I'm good to send. And once I hit send, it's done this entire workflow. I haven't had to jump to ChatGPT. I haven't had to jump to Gemini, Claude, any of these solutions. All my data is in one place, and I've been able to perform a very complex task that normally would take me a day or two to kind of put together in a matter of a couple of minutes. So again, back to Temi's point, I haven't used 6 or 8 applications. I've just used one in this case.
Thank you, Council. Thank you for your demonstration. And now we have this esteemed panel here who we're going to get an opportunity to hear from and get their perspectives on these points as well. So maybe I'll just ask, and then I would ask the prosecution and defense counsel to follow up on questions. But it's an initial prompt to make sure that our witnesses feel encouraged to step up and give us their genuine experiences and opinions. And Rod, can I ask you to start this conversation?
Absolutely, you can, Joe.
Thank you.
So, I'll share. Like, I think there's obviously a lot of concerns around AI that are very relevant and legitimate. Like, the thing for me that answered the question very clearly was, recently, my wife is a lawyer. She's a lawyer. I don't know anything about this. Is the first time I've done anything related to law.
Well, stay on your good behavior.
And so she volunteers at a shelter, and one day they said, hey, we want to do a little fun competition, create this little digital spinner thing. And so she said, no technical experience. She didn't tell me about that. She went on ChatGPT. She created a little spinner thing where you can spin the wheel and went back. And it actually generated all of the code for it. And they were able to put it right on their site. And she did this, and she has no technical knowledge or experience whatsoever.
We know that because she's a lawyer. That's a credible witness as far as I tell.
We're going to get more impressed if she was a judge. But it clearly shows that there is significant potential in the technology. Now, when you're working with it, you have to be careful. You need a human to oversee these things. And I'll share another example. We had recently incorporated Microsoft Copilot into our organization, and Copilot is a product that essentially allows you to use generative AI models to support all kinds of work activities. And if any of you have ever had recurring meetings, a meeting that just happens every week, let's say, or every month or whatever, we learned very quickly. Someone on my team had a recurring meeting, and every now and then you invite guests to your recurring meeting. You have one-off guests. So he had a meeting that was, running for a year or more. He invited guests throughout the year, and one day he had recorded his meeting with his team, and he asked it to send out notes. He didn't realize that it would send notes to everybody, including any guests you had ever invited to the meeting. And this was obviously a private meeting, so he got a big surprise. So this is an example of where you have to be careful, because if you don't prompt it the right way, or if you don't fully understand the technology, we're still debating with Microsoft whether this is a feature or bug. But you have to be careful because you can make mistakes, and it is a new technology, and it does require time to learn it and understand how it works. And so, I would say proceed with caution, but my wife can create code that could be integrated into a public site. I think there's definitely potential in this technology.
Thank you. Prosecution, defense, any follow-up questions to our first witness?
Definitely. So my question is, if a lawyer can create code, how are we sure that she's created the code the right way? Right. So in this case, are we giving access to non-technical users with the expectation that they're going to know how to use it? So let me make it real for you. Imagine walking into a job interview and the interviewer is using AI to judge your facial expression, to judge your credentials, and to judge how you're speaking. And do we have that expectation that that person is credible enough to use that tool? So I want to ask you, how are you approaching that in your organization, or even, personal lives with kids using AI nowadays?
And that's a great question, Temi. And, I would say to that, my wife's scenario was a very simple one. It wasn't a high-risk scenario. But you do have to be very careful. If you're not training your colleagues, you're not training the people using these tools, and we're not experts, then they can make mistakes. I mean, we're in a situation that's very rare. I don't recall this ever happening at any time as far as I can remember. We talk about innovator's dilemma. Well, we have the innovator's dilemma in every function of our organization. That's what's happening today. And you have to decide, are you going to disrupt yourself, or are you going to be disrupted? And even if you decide to disrupt yourself, you have to do it in a very careful way, because you could make mistakes, and you might make the right decision to disrupt yourself, but if you make mistakes, then you can end up on the wrong side of that, because there's still a lot of risks, and you have to make sure you're training folks, and we have all kinds of specialized functions. And we don't want to end up in a situation where we say, look, nobody else can do these jobs because it can only be specialized people, because we know that's going to evolve with these tools. But we need to enable the right standards, processes, protocols, and training to make sure if the non-experts start doing this stuff, they do it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have a question also for the panel. When that situation happened, specifically, I think even from an organization and sent out by accident. Did that ever happen again? Probably. Right. So I think there was an element of, there's a lot of.
Let the witnesses.
Oh, sorry.
You did it. I think the question starts, did it ever happen
Leading
again?
He's leading the witness.
Yeah,
sorry. Apologies.
honest mistake. Honest mistake.
But it didn't happen again for that person. Right. We're not fired. They were learning, and we allow for failure in our own organization. But it didn't happen for that person because they learned, and they went through that learning process. But it's happened to other people, and they're learning as well.
I would like to, our second witness, please, can we get your testimony?
So, with the question being around ease of use, in product design, they often say that the easiest to use products are the ones that you don't even notice that you're using. And so at one point, at a certain level, I think the question is flawed, because today, each and every one of us have used AI dozens of times. You just didn't know it. Every time you got a notification on your phone, as you entered into the building and was scanning your badge, there was probably hundreds of times that you used it actually today. You just didn't notice it. But speaking from personal experience, I think the Oculus example is actually really interesting, because the example was that of a manager asking an employee to build a marketing document. But wouldn't it just make more sense to not have the employee in the picture at all? Couldn't the manager just generate the document themselves? And so from my personal experience, we started a new company, we raised capital, and in the last two companies I ran, by this time, we would have hired 15 people. We would have a marketing team, and HR team, and a bunch of adjunct teams to support us on legal and all the other things that are in the company. But today, we raised capital, and we only have 4 technical folks because I use AI to do the HR and scan resumes. I use AI to review legal contracts. I use AI to do all of those secondary functions, including marketing, and help me like write LinkedIn posts. And so this is happening right now. And my personal experience is there's no going back.
Prosecution, any questions of our second witness?
So let's talk about operating model, right? So we're seeing that those jobs are created, the jobs are done by AI. What happens to the freshest graduate off the block who was actually trained to do this? And this is actually a personal thing that I'm also thinking about. How are you approaching that conversation?
The biggest challenge I'm seeing in the market right now, and it's not just for the non-technical roles, it's for all of them, is that the market has the most number of junior folks without jobs that I've ever seen. And so right now, a couple weeks ago, we posted a job posting, and I think we got 300 resumes in the first 2 hours. Our staff, we calculated, we actually couldn't review the number of applicants just in a reasonable time period. There's just so many folks looking for work right now, and because of AI, firms are hiring more intermediate senior folks and using AI to do what used to be done by junior folks. It's a huge, huge problem.
I heard you saying you could have replaced the junior person, which is a great point. But it sounds like you have 4 people in your organization. You could use these agents and you could do all the tasks. Why did you hire them?
So our company builds AI systems. And so we're training the models that are running AI for other companies.
So the models are going to replace them. So I am going to replace them.
But again, to the point, why have 4 people when one person could? Essentially, you could do the marketing, you could do sales, you can have these agents actually performing all these tasks on you. Is there any advantage that maybe, I don't want to lead again, but that they're experts in their space, that you are trusting them to use the tools to be able to produce an output?
I feel like I'm ChatGPT. I think,
or it could just be horsepower. I'm
yeah, so all of our AI software developers who are building the AI systems that are replacing workers, in effect, use AI as part of their job to accelerate their own work. Yeah.
So now we have a great, we have riches of witnesses and panelists. So, Ariane, we would love to get your testimony on this very important issue of accessibility and performance.
So I like Aka's demo a lot, right? That you're able to do a lot of these tasks, and in your demo you showed, if you just asked it to do something, it went in and found who to send an email to, drafted the email. So it wasn't just that you were in an email and said, hey, take this text and respond to it. It actually did about 3 or 4 functions already. So it is function replacement, and that was what I said in my opening, that there are going to be job losses associated with it. But I also would agree with Temi's point, because Temi, I think that the big point here is the trust and safety aspect of this. How many of you have watched Terminator? The movie Terminator? Okay. So, we all reference this in our AI field, that do we want Skynet, right? And without the proper guardrails for it to develop, for it to become Skynet, right? Elon Musk has talked about it. There's a lot, Dario over at Anthropic are not going as fast as OpenAI is. And Google, I think, delayed their ChatGPT-like solution, even on the behest of ChatGPT coming out with it first. But that Google wanted to correct it, at least that's what my understanding is. They wanted to make sure that it didn't hallucinate, that's the word. Hallucinations, which leads to people getting fired. Like Imran's wife, maybe. but the point is really valid, where if you are going to use these tools in your day-to-day, I think the question, yes, you can use it. You don't have to be a tech expert. Danny can use it. A lawyer can use it. I love you, Danny. But at the same time, there is a need for a human supervision. And I think you do need, that's why I like this line that when people ask me, oh, AI is going to take your job away, I always respond with, yeah, AI is going to take your job away if you're not using AI, right? So those are the people who are going to get their jobs taken away. I was just in UAE, they just raised a 1 million-person AI challenge of people writing good prompts. And how do they write good prompts? Because they don't even know how to write good prompts. You know, there's the saying now, the new programming language is not Python, it's English. You know, how do you write good prompts like that? But last thing I'll also say, to also balance this out a little bit, Temi, is that, you know, ChatGPT, when it came out, or 3.5, was trained on 1 petabyte of data. Petabyte is a lot of data. It's all of the web data available, all of it. And when you asked it questions, or I think it was a Google one that you asked it questions that gave you the wrong forefathers or whatever it was, that happens, that's hallucination. But did you know the largest bank in the world, JP Morgan Chase, has 150 petabyte of data? They're sitting on 150 petabyte of data. They're not going to take that data and put it into, you know, not trusted things. So I think the humans who are going to need to build trust, the 4 people that are at Transformer Labs are adding that trust layer that the rest of it can all be automated. But I think people need to understand how to build trust layer, which is from your last presentation that you did at EY. So I still remember that.
Thank you. Prosecution, do you have a follow-up question for
I'm gonna add to the conversation. So I remember approaching someone to build me a prototype, and the person was charging me a large amount of money. And so I was looking at my finances, trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I can't do this yet. And I was on TikTok, and I followed this lady, and she posted about maybes.ai. So I'm not the one who would jump on the latest tool to use it, because it's like, oh, I'm getting saturated. But I was like, okay, you know what, Temi, let's check out maybes.ai, because most of them actually do the same thing, it's just a different UI most of the time. So I went to it because I was bored, and I put in a prompt, and it built me an MVP prototype. Now, I was so excited, and I put it on social media, sent it to my friends, like, hey, this thing is going to build, just a prompt, it built me the workflows, the user stories, it built me the website, and it built me the app, the web app, just within, it's like 5 minutes. But then I sent it to my friend through text, and they tried to access it. They could access it, but when it came to move it to the next page, it wasn't it wasn't mobile friendly. So it just shows that this tool itself is very useful. You just have to figure out the one that works for you, how good it is, but there's still limitations behind it, and that's why I would admonish organizations not just to throw out their teams, bring in people, train them on how to optimize this thing so at least it can become, it's just like the computer, right? The computer helps us do work, but it's not taking away our work. So that's my little spiel on the use of AI itself. It's daily work. And the last point I want to say is, I know people are going to be spinning out, you know, operating model is changing, financial models are changing. It's speed now and execution, right? So are we going to judge the people who have access to these tools better than the people who don't have access to these tools? And how are we going to level that playing field? So just a thought that I wanted to put out.
Thank you, prosecution, and turn over to defense for the last question or words on this segment.
I think Aragon brought up a good point, just around the tech experts and needing the right folks to actually be able to build out these solutions. And I think even the point around, you know, once the calculator was built, we didn't get rid of mathematicians. You know, they're still around. It's the same thing here, right? Like, the experts will still always be required. They'll always still be leveraged. Things will fail, and that's when you need a human supervision to kind of support. And maybe this might lead to a question for you, Ramadan. What do you think the new generation might need to actually upskill themselves, knowing that this is the path we're heading?
So I think that's the number one question these days, right? Which is, if I happen to be on the advisory board of the University of Waterloo Engineering School of Business, and they have the number one computer science program, the computer engineering program. I think you need like a 98% to get in right now, right? Then the first job that you get when you graduate computer science, computer engineering is $250,000 USD. either Tesla or Apple or whatever, right? So they have the best program. However, now if they are not hiring those programmers, what happens next? And I think the need to really develop creative thought and not just be the technical monkey on Python, to actually have your creative thoughts. I think liberal arts needs to become cool again in a big way. I think people need to understand how, I personally learned how ChatGPT ChatGPT 2, which is the basic version, was built by Andrich. What's Andrich's last name? Andrich Karpali. He was the Tesla AI, then he was OpenAI. Karpali, right? Andrich Karpali. If you haven't followed this guy, it's incredible. And he, there's a YouTube he created. In 3 hours, you can learn how it was all programmed, what are the different ways of doing it, how do you write a prompt, what is chain of thought, how do you actually put together a model. But a lot of it is actually humans thinking about the various different ways of doing it. But unfortunately, our universities are not teaching that way. Our upskilling that we need to do for a lot of our employees. I think Mark Carney just talked about this, where Canadians need to upskill in general, or else we are going to deal with this very high unemployment. And a lot of that unemployment is going to be on the behest of our young professionals. Most of us are sick. It's the young ones, right?
Thank you. And we're going to move on to the second part of our discussion, and the second piece of our trial, which is related to the question of trust and transparency, really. The complaint is, can I trust AI if I don't understand how it works? So, prosecution Temi, I would love to get your initial submissions on this very important aspect of our trial here today.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I would like to raise this example. Who headed up the company who raised a lot of money, and it turned out that the AI behind it were just Indian coders. Yes. All right. Now let's move on to making it practical. How many of you will go to the bank to withdraw $1 million because I said so? Would you walk down to TD Bank and say, Temi, that's what you said, so can I have $1 million?
I have it in my I'll go.
You don't trust me? Okay. How about, will you ride a Ferrari without a manual? Who would jump into a Ferrari? Without a manual. Okay, so I was doing it. And then I'll ask questions on my way. But here's the point, right? How do we trust that the tools are actually working the way we think it should work, right? How do you trust your doctor when you go into his office and then it brings out AI and say, hey, she's having a headache. What do I do, right? Do you really trust the machine just like you trust the human behind it, right? Human faces, credibility, it brings in personal touch. AI sometimes doesn't bring in credibility or personal touch. Sometimes when you see some ads, I know some ads that are AI ads. I know voices that are AI voices. Once I see the tone going just exactly in a straight line, I'm like, this is AI. I lose interest in it. So I'm going to ask you, in your daily job, can you explain to your manager how you came about that document if he should ask you how you did it? Will you say, oh, the AI gave me that? So I want to hear how the defense is going to solve this.
Thank you, prosecution defense. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Honor. To the jury as well. There's this question around trust with these AI models. But as a manager, how often when you do get pieces of material, you're like, you know what? I trust my employee 100% and I'm going to send it to the client. You don't. You double check the work. You make sure that everything, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. You validate that the information that your employee produced was credible, and then you send it. So there's no difference here versus these AI models. These are, dumb, stochastic interns that are producing output at a much faster and higher throughput. But the benefit here is the speed, and you're still the validator at the end of the day. Like, prosecution brought up a great point. Your physician tells you something. Do you trust it 100% of the time? my wife's a physician. She tells me, oh, this is what you should do. I'm always like, can I get a second opinion? Because for me, it's all about data samples. Make sure that I get enough variety of input before I make an informed decision, right? I don't trust Wall Street Best for my investment portfolio, right? I look at Wall Street Best and some Twitter, and then I make a decision. But this is the whole element of trust. I think getting a variety of data and then also validity around it as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, Defense, did you have a demo you wanted to share with us?
Yes, Judge. So some of you might have seen me speak last time, and I did a little demo of Notebook LM. Today I'm going to bring this demo back up, maybe show you a couple different elements around this. And essentially Notebook LM is a tool that's actually free that you can use that you actually upload documents, upload information. It was essentially built for you to actually communicate with books. So you upload, you can upload full textbooks, upload contracts even, and you can actually ask questions, and it becomes your own personal assistant on that topic. It almost becomes a PhD level expert on that specific topic. So I'm going to show you a quick example of how this works and how trust is important, especially when producing some of these outputs. So I'm going to start from scratch, and let's say I'm actually a lawyer. I am a lawyer. So I'm a lawyer within corporate law. And in this case, I received an MSA from my client that I will upload, and I'm part of my NeuroVibe AI business. So I'm uploading the master service agreement for my business into Notebook LM. And what you see it do is it automatically understands this document, and it's already giving me a quick summary. This is a master service agreement outlining the contractual relationship between NeuroVibe AI and Unicorn Corporation, and it goes into detail to establish the terms under the NeuroVibe will provide blah blah blah, right? So great, it's given me all this information, and now I can have almost like a chatbot-like experience where I can start asking questions. So I'm going to start with the first question: who holds the intellectual property rights? And it's going to give me the answer based off of the document. And do I trust this answer is the real question. You can see as it's producing the output, it's actually giving me references of where this information. So it says, here's a breakdown of who holds intellectual properties, pre-existing materials, tools, methodologies, and it's saying NeuroVibe AI. And it's actually giving me the reference at the end. If I click on this, it takes me to the section in the document where it actually referred to that it's summarized and produced this output. And as I keep going, you can see in other areas where it's done additional references, and I can jump to those portions to see what information it's actually referring to. So it's not about trust here, it's about validating, right? So being transparent in terms of your data, obviously leveraging AI to be able to produce the output, but then confirming that the output is actually correct. One last element I will add here is I'm going to now upload an amendment to this MSA. So new terms have been added to my contract. And what I want to be able to do is, actually figure out what these new terms are. So I want to actually ask a question around, given the draft amendment proposed by the client, what terms would be changing in this MSA? And you can see immediately it's processed this document and it's already talking about, first, termination clause amendment, section 2, termination of the original agreement has been amended, and specifically around the clients, it's changed it to 60 days written notice compared to 90 days, right? And it gives some other examples in terms of, and now it's added an introduction to financial penalties, and again, validate everything. So it's great, it's given me this, but where is this in the document? Show me the section that is produced where it's talking about the termination agreement, right? So again, transparency is about validation, and AI is very much I wouldn't trust unless you're able to validate the output. All right, my date.
Thank you for those submissions. Now maybe we'll ask our witnesses in the same order as the previous segment, and I'll start with Imran. Imran, can you share your perspectives on this very important issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the trust issue is a big deal, but humans are often also not always right, and can often be very wrong in many instances. I'll share an example of that. Yeah, actually, the last Max, this is the second Max event I've attended. The last one, I met someone who runs an AI company. In fact, he's sitting right here in the garage. Wave your hand. I'm going to use your company as an example. It's a healthcare company that looks at X-rays and MRIs and radiology scan to look for lung issues. If you've ever been to the emergency room at a hospital, it's very, very busy. There's a lot going on, and there often aren't that many doctors available, and certainly not always the specialists that you need. And so having AI support the staff and see, okay, the way I'm reading this, is it different from what the AI is telling me? And if you see the difference, then that might help you. It might give you some additional insight that you might have not had. If it's the same, then it gives you some more confidence that it's the same. And that maybe you're right. And augmenting a human in that way, you're not trusting the answer on its own, but you're augmenting a human, an expert to support them. And in fact, what I learned actually from Rod is oftentimes, when you're in that emergency room situation, doctors can be wrong. They need to wait for a specialist to come in and actually validate the result. And so this is one example. There's probably many across, many of our enterprises, and in our daily lives where we can use these systems to augment, our own knowledge, or to augment the knowledge of an expert that we're working with. And so I do see that as a huge benefit to just validate in a situation where you may not have time or expertise. And so that's the scenario. Trusting it on its own for that, I agree, is risky. You have to be very careful. But using it as a tool to support our experts, I think, can be very valuable.
Thank you for this prosecution.
So this question is for Asaria. So I'm curious on how you trusted the AI to start the work on probably your marketing manager, and was the first response exactly what you wanted, and did you spend more time fine-tuning it to actually do that work so that you can trust it?
Yeah, I feel like we're all going through this right now, right? We're building trust with these systems. We're testing them out, we're asking them questions, and we're finding out their limits, and what they're really good at. I feel like this is kind of a generational experience for all of us. And I feel like I'm guessing, and this is hearsay.
Hey, Becky, I'm listening. Some people say you remind me of somebody. Some people say. I didn't say. Some people say. But go ahead. Some people
say that the tools are getting better and better. So how do you offer any advice to the question?
Yeah, and did you find yourself spending more time to train it than if you just did it yourself, if you had the knowledge?
That's the challenge, if I have the knowledge, right? Because I'm using AI now to review contracts, but I don't have legal contract experience. I have enough knowledge to know if someone knows how to review a contract. Because I look supposed to do that, but I don't know how to review a contract.
All right.
Defense, firstly, I want to ask whether you have a question or a follow-on to our primary witness one.
Good question for Imran. Where have you seen experts in their field leveraging AI that really help them evolve and maybe even have better outputs and throughputs as a result, where they're now more efficient at their job?
I shared earlier, I believe that almost every function in every organization is facing an innovative dilemma. Disruption is at your door wherever you are. I'll share one example, and again, I'll point to Simon. Simon leads automation at TD Bank, and if you think about automation, Simon's team builds digital robots, and they've been doing that for a long time. And so they built traditional digital robots that are very efficient and effective, and they're experts. They understand how to optimize processes. They understand how to use different tools, vision-based tools, things like that. Now you have agentic AI. And in that moment, you can either
be disrupted or you can be the disruptor. There's no in between. And so Simon's team has applied workflows, natural workflows using agentic AI to and use the skills and knowledge that they have, which is critical because if you bring somebody new in, you need the experts that understand how those things work and can apply AI to those things. And demonstrated that you can have tremendous efficiency doing it that way. And so we've seen that example, which is a fantastic example. You get massive savings through that, and every organization is going to do that. And you don't have to be an AI expert, but the AI needs the knowledge that you have and the expertise that you have. Because in isolation, you can't be successful. Just by having an AI engineer do that by themselves, I don't believe that you can be successful. And you tested that with some of the best people. You need the knowledge around it and the expertise around it, and then you use the models and the agents to support the people that understand and have the expertise. We believe that model works really, really well. And Simon, wave your hand, so I approve you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to our second witness. Ali, can we get your testimony now?
Okay.
Direct testimony.
Okay, so as a computer engineer, I'll start with forward saying there's a common story you've probably heard. If you take a deck of cards, 52 cards, and you shuffle it, you do a fair shuffle, which I think requires like 7 shuffles to be fair, and you lay out those cards. The combination of cards that you see in front of you has never existed in the history of time ever before. It's just because of the nature of math and combinatoric that numbers too large. The actual number of combinations that you can have is more than the number of atoms in the universe. And so there's just a weird mathematical thing that happens when you take a number and multiply over any dimensions in that way. And large language models work on that science, right? And so they work on something called latent spaces, which is basically matrices which represent multi-dimensional spaces that are multiplied against each other. And what ends up happening, that really cares, is basically the number of outputs that are possible for a large language model effectively are infinity, because if you were to try to calculate them backwards, you would need more energy and more atoms than exist in the middle. So you literally mathematically cannot predict what a large language model can do. That math also applies to the human brain. We actually have these infinite computers inside our heads right now that can produce outputs that are impossible to predict just by the nature of how much energy is in the neurons, right? So it's kind of like a mini infinity inside each of our heads. And so then you have to ask the question of what is trust, right? When you cannot predict what the output is. For the longest time for computers, the way we would define security and trust would be you have to map out every single output and make sure that they were safe. That as an expert witness, I can tell you that is impossible in current forms of AI. But it's also impossible to trust your doctor. Every person in this room is a dangerous person right now. All of us right now. You have that possibility within you, but we're all happily laughing and having a conversation. And so I think from my expert witness, from my perspective, from a mathematical perspective, I think the hardest challenge for us is to break free from the old way that we would think of trust being knowing every possible path. And then all of a sudden now, you have to think of these computers more like people, and we have tools to understand why people behave certain ways, but they're not mathematical tools. They're things like psychology and philosophy. They're like wishy-washy. And we have to use similar tools for these computers because we cannot mathematically ever trust them. I would say as someone in this field.
I'll turn over to our defense counsel for further questions to our witness.
Quick question for you, Ali. You're talking about these, matrix multiplications and infinite possibilities of the result. What is our current limitations in terms of from a technology standpoint? That's we hear a lot around AGI, like artificial general intelligence, and ASI, like artificial superintelligence. Do you think what is going to cause this step change for us to actually maybe get there?
So I think the current theory on how you get to AGI from where we are now, I think is your question. Right now, the best experts in the field just believe it's a scaling problem. So there's no new technique that we have to invent in order to get to AGI. We just have to scale up the models that we currently have, which just requires more hardware, which is being built right now. So the best theory, no one knows the answer, obviously, we've had AGI, and the answer is just keep doing what we're doing at a bigger scale. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna now turn to our third witness, Arvada, and get your testimony on this transparency and trust issue. It seems to be very complicated.
So I'll maybe build on what Ali was just talking about around hardware. So how many of you know what a data center is? Raise your hand, right? So China is building about 100 gigawatt worth of data centers or capacity data center. 100 gigawatt. So 1 gigawatt requires about $40 billion to build 1 gigawatt worth of data center. So when Trump recently went to Saudi and went to Abu Dhabi, he signed these deals where they're building a 3 or 5 gigawatt data center in Abu Dhabi. There's this new concept of sovereign AI, which basically requires you to take your own data, that 150 petabyte data that I was talking about that JP Morgan has, similar to that, Canadian values are sovereign to Canada, right? Even San Francisco to Texas, they're two separate values, right? Saudi has its own values. Pakistan, where the country I come from, has separate values. We all have separate values. Sinai has separate values to Ali, Danny's to mine. I think we all have different systems. And I think there is a need for a lot of, I think one is that there's a hardware problem, that how do you build hardware fast enough so you can get to the scaling. And then after that, there is another ceiling we're going to hit, which is the data problem. How do you get that type of data, the right kind of chain of thought, built out on top of those data centers, right? The reason I'm sharing this is to give you all ideas on not to be a cog in the wheel of an employee that eventually gets, first 2 or 3 parts of our discussion was all about is coming, right? And it's going to be a replacement of jobs. But where are the opportunities is where I wanted to focus a little bit on how you build the trust. So I think the trust is in that data layer, and where the humans are the ones who have to provide some chain of thought. So I'll give you an example. One company where I'm a lead investor, executive chair, is called RX Food AI. And what RX Food has done is they have solved a problem where I wear an Apple Watch, and you all know what an Apple Watch or Fitbit does, right? It measures your steps or your cardiovascular and others. Based on my pulse, or they're able to understand my movement. But then when it comes to the nutrition, what I eat has never been solved. I have to put in, this is what I drank, or this is what I ate, it has these many calories. They figured out how to take a picture of what you eat, and it gives you all your macros. It gives you what your protein intake is, what your vitamin D, what your fiber is, all of that, right? The reason, in order for them to build that AI agent, which is now being used by Sun Life, Manulife, Canada Life, Great Life, Walmart is now offering it to their consumers so that they can take pictures of their food, and then it tells them this is what you're eating, healthy or not, and then gives you a coupon. And now Eli Lilly, the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, is now focused on wellness. Even though they give you drugs, they want you to focus on wellness. So in order to build trust in RX Food AI for hospitals like Sick Kids to use it or Trillium to use it, they needed dietitians and nutritionists to do that work. Now, once the nutritionists and the dietitians have trained that, then you can now bring that to market. Then you need less dietitians and nutritionists, right? So the point is, how do you find more data opportunities like that in different sectors of your domain? That's why it's so important to find domain specific. And then the last one I'll give my testimony, Your Honor, to is in Abu Dhabi, and I know you have certain ventures and your family, the kind of work you do, in the Middle East, the sovereign wealth funds are now wanting to make decisions on where to invest. And they have to do due diligence. When they do due diligence, they have their own data that they want to use, and they want to have better investment thesis. So they're working with this other firm that I have called Altruistic AI, where largest sovereign wealth funds that have $1 trillion under management are now saying, well, find us the right kind of due diligence on how due diligence gets done, and work through that entire process. And they pay those people like $10,000 an hour to do that type of work, right? So there are these new jobs that are being created, but we need to build trust in this AI with humans, but that is domain-specific trust that's going to be built. And the final thing I'll say is that just like there was a time where there was an elevator operator in New York to take you up, now you press a button and that takes you up to 33rd floor. The elevator operator, I'm sure, got another job. The thing what we need to figure out is that how do you build trust with domain-specific data? Similar to what Ali said, there's a scaling problem right now for hardware. Then there's a other thing we're going to hit, which is a data problem, and then we're going to hit an energy problem after that. We can talk about that later.
Thank you, Mohan. Prosecution, do you have follow-up questions for us?
Yes, so I have a follow-up question. There's a saying that the opportunities are endless. However, in the times we're in, the economy with, the trends of someone building something somewhere and we're finding a better tool, like I always say this, that my sleep is controlled by somebody maybe in China today because I can wake up and then there's a new model that needs to be tested. So with that information overload and with that massive opportunity, how do you all need to stay focused? And as a domain expert, how can you identify those opportunities when there's a sea of things you can do and you can go into confusion?
I think your premise is really valid. I would even say, if we're only thinking about just being a domain expert, that's not enough. I think Ali's building a company. There's a reason he's building a company with 4 people. There's a race in Silicon Valley who's going to build the first $1 billion unicorn with 1 person, right? I think the answer is, how do we become entrepreneurs again? I think that's the answer. Remember, there was a time when we were all in agriculture, and then the Industrial Revolution came in, and we all became doctors, scientists, lawyers. So then I think that's about to shift back to, you have this land, figurative land of data, or and build a business that actually helps you cultivate. The answer is not just to be a domain expert, to do this work for nutrition or do this work for an asset manager. Sure, that's an interim thing, but I think the long-term thing, especially for Max, and the purpose of Max is really to have more Muslims achieving excellence. And in order to do that, we all need to actually be at the forefront of this, right? Shift from fire to electricity to now AI is that big. So more entrepreneurial.
Defense, do you have a question for our witness?
Yeah, so Arvigan, I think you brought up a great point in terms of even earlier when you started off your discussion around the exponential growth of AI. I do think there is a limiting factor here, like as much as AI is moving at such a fast pace, like every day there's a new invention almost. And to your point, you probably will bring up at the end around the environmental impacts, around us maybe not having enough electricity to actually run these data centers. What do you think is going to be the limitations, or do you think this party is ever going to stop?
Maybe I'll start, and Ali and Imran can also add to this as well. I think there are new industries are going to be born. It's similar to, when internet first came out, a lot of people didn't think about how to use the internet, Netscape, I'm dating myself to Yahoo, Alta Vista, and all of that, right? Google didn't want. Similar to that, I think then there were, companies built, like you mentioned, Salesforce or Oracle or ServiceNow, a bunch of companies, and now there's the hyperscalers, and then there's the Uber or Airbnb or the mobile revolution that came in. I think there's going to be this next revolution where just all at the infancy of it that's going to blow up, where Serena picking, here as the Chief Development Officer of the Supercluster of Digital Supercluster of Canada, where all Canada is like investing in digital superclusters. I think we all need to sort of think about what's next is more about what is the next Uber, what is the next Facebook, what is that next Airbnb that looks like, and that connects to entrepreneurial initiatives. Maybe I'll have
this is what I think that's a great actually segue to what I was going to propose as we get into the end of this trial and get to our jury voting again. which is to give each panelist, each one of our witnesses, a last opportunity, kind of in 1 or 2 minutes, to summarize or highlight or to add something that maybe was not brought out in the questioning. And then from there, I thought I would turn it over to our jury, our audience here, for any questions. Then I'll make maybe some final remarks. Then we'll have closing arguments, and then we'll have the final trial verdict vote. So, and Ron, what would be your summary, your final take on these very important issues we've debated in this trial today?
My biggest takeaway for all of you is, bring your best entrepreneurial self to everything you do, because this is the time for it. And, I don't know how fast everything is going to progress. We're in the era of, do you remember those cell phones that people used to have in the 80s? That's what ChatGPT is right now. And you saw they acquired, a design firm for $6.5 billion. We're going to see some amazing things, amazing experiences, whether the models plateau or not. There's going to be a greater focus on what these things can do for humans and what the potential is and the level and scale of innovation. You have no idea what it can be. And so I think we need entrepreneurs right now. I think entrepreneurial skills will be very important in the future. And I just urge you to really bring your best entrepreneurial self to everything you do.
Thank you.
The Industrial Revolution was brought up, and I think we're living at a time that there's maybe even a bigger shift, faster shift than what happened in the Industrial Revolution. And we often think about the Industrial Revolution from a positive perspective, because after hundreds of years of this change that happened over this large period of time, that revolution, it went from massive injustice, like just huge joblessness and shifts and concentration of power, to the creation of a whole new social fabric where things like unions had to exist to push back against the challenges that came from this massive change. And so I currently think a lot about what does it mean to be a Muslim during a world revolution. And for me, to be a Muslim in a revolution means to be a leader. And I think the mistake we make, I think we've even made it a couple of times now, is to think that to lead means to capture the wealth. But our religion is all about how to right? Like our job isn't to try to accumulate everything right till we get to the grave. Our job is to speak up for a more just world. And so I predict that there will be a rewriting of the social fabric because of the pushback that will happen against the concentration of wealth that is implicit in the fact that a few folks are going to control so much more wealth and power because of AI. And it's our job, I believe, to not wait for the revolution the counter-revolution to happen, but to speak up for that counter-revolution now, to speak up for all the folks who will be, I get to write this AI, but there's a whole bunch of folks who are not going to be able to ride the wave. They're going to be crushed by it. And so I think a lot about our religious responsibilities to imagine what a new world and a new set of rules look like, and to be the leaders in discarding our existing rules, because it's just so easy to keep playing the game the way we've always been playing, like all of these systems, including capitalism. But could we rewrite those things? Can we speak up for those things? Can we imagine a world where our job isn't to just benefit the most from AI and watch what happens, but to try to imagine a better world that kind of spreads that wealth and power amongst as many people? I think that's a huge opportunity for us, and I don't know if there's, I don't know who else is going to do it.
Thank you, Ron.
I'm actually going to read for something because I recently just came back from a trip and I met some amazing, the guy who actually came up with the exponential business theory and book, where he talks about this phenomenon of dementis. Here, most CEOs actually go and attend his exponential theory conference every year in Silicon Valley, and Elon Musk and everybody else shows up. And he just said, he said, what should we be doing if all of this was to be true, that social order is going to be disrupted and all of that? What should we be doing? And I think I'll read from what he's highlighted. I think number one is shift from job applicant to an entrepreneurial mindset. I think we discussed that already, right? Which is the only secure job is going to be being an entrepreneur, where we train an entire generation to get jobs rather than create opportunities. But the tools are democratized now, right? For example, he's recently met Sanjay, a successful entrepreneur who's witnessing this transformation firsthand in India. 1.4 billion people. India's promises to get education, get a job, and it's all broken. And coding jobs are vanishing in India now. So Sanjay's mission is to upskill young people in India to become entrepreneurs and create their own opportunities, right? They're already doing that over there. They know that trades left position. Number two is develop curiosity and adaptability, right? What you were asking me earlier, what should young people be doing? And I think traditional career ladder is dead, so curiosity and adaptability now outperform career pathing, right? Rather than going up at Torys and trying to become a partner, trying to make sure you take the senior partners out for lunch and dinner and all of that, like that career pathing.
I'll be a lot skinnier. I would have been a lot skinnier.
Right. And so that's number two, right? Which it means that continuous learning means survival, that those who embrace lifelong learning, stay informed about AI developments and readily acquire new skills are going to thrive. Number three is execute the singularity sprint. And what he talks about this is that time is limited. There's a narrow window to build something meaningful before AI erodes even human leverage entirely, which is what Ali just said. And that, so call it a singularity sprint, which is an all-out rush to launch bold projects now, given that's the reality in the long horizon. And then fourth one, he says, expect short-term pain before long-term abundance. And what he means by that is, the truth is that given the rapidly increasing pace of change, the coming years will feel very chaotic, very unprecedented, where job losses are going to lead to 20-30% unemployment rate. Kids are not going to be moving out of the house because they're not going to be getting the jobs. So, people are not going to be able to retire, all those challenges. So, but remember that we have the ability and to create this intentional future, but all of us need to think through it. So I just thought that, this is a brainiac who has spent a lot of time thinking about this, so I'll just read from what his advice to us as CEOs were that I just shared with all.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, at this point, I want to turn it over to our prosecution and the defense for the closing arguments, and then we're going to have another vote, and then we're going to see where we ended up after all this great conversation. Please, prosecution Temi, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, we've all seen how good AI can be, and we've seen how scary some of the impact can be. And so I'm going to admonish us that we should think beyond the job, start to think of ourselves, what it can do for us, especially our families, how they can use it, and the young ones, how they're transitioning into the market, what are the opportunities there, and also consider the risk of using it, particularly to yourself. Ask questions on how the decisions are made, because they are being made whether we like it or not. And I hope that we can all be in the driver's seat and push this forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to our defense counsel, please.
Thank you, Honorable Judge. Esteemed jury.
Well done.
That's a bribe.
Always.
So I think the two questions that we saw today is around performance of these solutions, right? Does this work in my day-to-day? And then the second element of trust. Do I actually trust the output of these solutions? And I think as you're using AI in your day-to-day, and it's essentially unavoidable, you're going to get to a point where you have to leverage it, especially in work. Think of how you're going to leverage this to, speed up and automate some of the redundant tasks that you actually don't enjoy doing anyways, right? So think of, typical process. I always think, what are the basic things that I can automate out of my daily life, which I don't even enjoy doing myself? And this is where the true value of AI is. For me to be able to automate the boring tasks so I can focus on, the more interesting use cases, and then spend the remaining time with family and friends, right? That's what it's all about. We've been spending our entire lives in these 9 to 5s, and now leveraging AI, we can automate a lot of this difficult work so that we can spend, maybe even shorter work weeks. We've been talking about 4-day work weeks, 3-day work weeks. That stuff is in the horizon, especially with automation. So, take this as positive change. I know we've been talking about doom and gloom, but, a lot of people have really thought through how this is going to change, and it will gradually make, an impact in your life. Not something that will happen overnight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we're going to take an opportunity on the basis of this exceptional trial and submissions and the testimony for you to vote again. So let's commence that voting process and turn it over to our jury. Is this the final verdict here? The final verdict? All right, so it is 97% to 3% that it started off with 86%, yes. So it went out, 11% that we, the trial, the jury has determined that the might of AI technology will award its users with a competitive edge too powerful to ignore. Well, thank you very much. This is a really interesting sample of the debate that's going on more broadly in our community and in the world. I want to thank our amazing, as you saw today, this was a conversation. The trial format was to engage everybody and to get all these great ideas. There is no winner and loser. We are all winners because of the result of this conversation and everything that we've learned and all the knowledge and experience that we've been exposed to. So on that note, I do want to thank everybody again. Thank you very much.